Hello, everyone. It's Marshall Chess again. Been thinking about what I forgot about Chess Records, people who mattered that I should mention. And the one that comes up the most, and who was my full partner in all of my personal productions, was a guy named Gene Barge, a master saxophone player, great musician, a great human being who was very instrumental to the many successes of Chess Records. Let me tell you a little how Gene came to Chess. In the early eras of Chess, all the record promotion was done by my father and uncle by car. They'd ride around the country, mostly the East Coast and the South in America, visiting radio stations, making contacts to get the record played, looking for talent, paying off disc jockeys to play the record, finding places to sell the record, because black music in those days wasn't sold in many record shops. There were a few big ones that did, but most of the records sold in black neighborhoods were from barber shops, places that sold milk and soda. They would also sell a few records if it was a hit on the radio. So that's what they did. My uncle covered the southeast of America. That was his territory. My dad covered the South, and later on the West. And my uncle, New York, both of them New York. My uncle was on a trip by car in Virginia, in Norfolk, Virginia. While visiting the local R&B, rhythm and blues radio station in Norfolk, my uncle met a guy named Gene Barge. The DJ introduced him and said, "This is Gene Barge. He works with Frank Guido of Legend Records." Well, Legend had one hit. It was a one-hit only record label owned by a guy named Frank Guido, who owned a record shop in Norfolk, Virginia. But it was a massive nationwide hit called "Quarter to Three" by U.S. Bonds. And Gene Barge was basically the producer, band leader, main musician on that record. And when Gene met my uncle, somehow in the conversation it came up that he had written an instrumental. My uncle said, "Come on, man, play it for me." And he happened to have his saxophone with him, and it's in a small bag he carried around. And basically, he picked up the saxophone and played country, which was a song he'd written. And my uncle was blown away. He said, "Man, that's a catchy tune. Can we record it here?" And then they did another take of it and actually recorded it in the radio station. And my uncle went back to Chicago with the tape, and everyone just loved it, thought it could be a possible hit. Now, I can't remember if Gene Barge came to Chicago and recorded a new version of country or it was the original tape. I can't remember, and no one I know is still alive that I can ask. But anyway, Chess put out country, and Gene Barge moved to Chicago with his new wife. And he went from being a local Norfolk, Virginia sideman musician and high school music teacher to being a record producer at Chess Records in Chicago. Joined our house musicians that were always playing on all the sessions and became our sax player, one of them anyway. And he was just a great man, a great human being, a great musician. And the more he spent at Chess, the more he got involved with all the artists, with co-producing many of the great R&B records by Etta James, Mitty Collier, Billy Stewart, making his own album and his own. And in my own case, when I decided to start my own label, Cadet Concept, and came up with the idea of Rotary Connection, I knew that I had the concepts and idea in my head, but I was insecure in my ability to tell musicians how to get what I wanted in the recording studio. I knew how to produce records, but I didn't know the language of music. I knew how to read music, but there was a lot I knew I didn't know. And I had become friends with Gene. And I'd also, by then, discovered the great arranger Charles Stepney. And when I did Rotary Connection, I called Gene Barge and Charles Stepney in a room and I said, "Will you become my partners? I need you to help me translate these ideas I have for this new label we're going to have, Cadet Concept, aimed at FM radio, all the new young pot smoking, rock and roll loving teenagers in America. Will you help me?" So Gene became my partner on many albums. I mean, all those Cadet Concept albums, Rotary Connection, Electric Mud, the Howling Wolf album, John Clemmer's jazz saxophone album. Gene was always my right-hand man, and we remained friends. After Chess Records was sold, Gene's career didn't stop. He ended up in Memphis being the gospel director of the great Stax Records, as well as doing many Hollywood movies as an actor. He was a truly multi-talented artist. Unfortunately, Gene recently passed away in early February 2025. And he was playing saxophone up until the end. 5 or 6 years ago, when he was in his late 80s, I was at a club in Chicago and heard him play and hung out with him. He was a great musician to the end. And I think it's the music that kept him alive so long. That's my word on a great contribution to the many hits of Chess Records, Gene Barge. It's Marshall Chess again. I'm going to see you again soon with some more stories.